Welcome back to Through a Glass Darkly Radio. You're listening to us on United Public Radio. The intro music was Mark of the Doomslayer by Karl Casey at White Bat Audio. Welcome back, everyone. What a wild and crazy week. Well, let me take a look before I get started. Let me. Wow, I have a lot of comments tonight. I'm going to go through the comments really quickly, and then we can briefly talk about what happened. I will try to be pretty succinct on that. Let me find out where we are. Oh man. All right, I think we already posted some of these, but yeah, spiritual ascension, what a time to be having an earth experience. We're talking about coffee too. Kusama Gaming. Is it Kusama or Kusama? I'll say Kusama. That sounds more Swedish, but maybe not. New challenge is coming. Okay. Tim Beck, weird scenes in the gold mine. I'm not MK'd. I guess MK Ultra'd. Coffee, yes, please. I have my coffee. You can imagine what brand, but since I'm not getting paid for it on this radio show, I'm not going to mention what it is, but I would happily mention it if I had a contract from that company. Anyway, by the way, I'm only allowed to drink one of those once a week because they make me fat. So, all right. So spiritual ascension, God soldiers are unable to be tampered with. No MK Ultra for us. Okay, I already went through a lot of this. Okay, we're talking about grays. Okay. All right, so Kusama Gaming is saying, I'm more curious why the memories come through now. He's talking about grays. Spiritual Ascension is saying, we are remembering. The veil is thinning dramatically. Earthkeeper is saying it's Sunday, 12 p.m. in Australia. Kusama Gaming is saying, I want to remember the good stuff. Spiritual Ascension, it's all an experience. Logan Clark is just mentioning we're time traveling down under. Hey, Scott, good to see you, my friend. Scott Ian. Terrence Wills is writing, I Googled awesome channels and it brought me here. I know you're lying, but I appreciate that. By the way, I had my first guest who said, I found your channel, that YouTube recommended him my channel. And that was Adam Butler. And I literally just laughed. I'm like, you're the first, brother. You're the first. Oh boy. Mosquito annoying. Yes, serious. Mosquitoes are annoying. Earthkeepers at Logan. Hiya, fellow traveler. Yeah, it was a loco week. John Kurtz. Absolutely. All right, Logan Clark, as I'm in the States. Okay. Spiritual Ascension said, I told you last week, Sean, things are going to start getting wild. They're going to get wilder from here. Spectacle in the Simulacrum. Tim Beck is writing. Woo Riders DG, prayers for Charlie Kirk, his family, the victims at Colorado High School, and all others. Yeah, or the woman who was stabbed needlessly. Ukrainian refugee escapes a war zone only to come back to the United States. It's not the first. I had dinner with a friend who survived the Iraq War, and only to get mugged near the World Trade Center, ruins when I met him in New York. So yeah, the United States, we don't provide enough resources to cops or anything. People are basically at their own mercy. Yeah, Logan Clark, how come every time we have a UAP hearing, they start killing high-profile people? Well, there's other stuff that's coming out too. There's data about a certain treatment that people were forced to have that's coming out. So, best to hide that. But let's talk a little bit about. So there's no kind of dialogue possible with. I'm just going to say this with the kind of the far left. There's just no dialogue possible. Um, so this stuff's going to continue to happen. I just urge people to be cautious, not to be rash, and just avoid large crowds. But there is no dialogue possible, and that was Charlie Kirk's error. That was his mistake. You can't talk to these people. There's no talking to these people. Um, just avoid them, and if you can't avoid them, well, but there's just no dialogue is possible. And he was about the most innocuous human being to take out. So I think, and I don't even know if this was. I don't even want to place this on the left, because I think this whole thing was orchestrated and meant to divide everybody. It was meant to increase the prospect of depopulation, particularly in Western countries. And I think that's the point, right? I think you have psychological sterilization, you have chemical sterilization, which, again, a certain medical treatment that, well, I can't talk about this stuff, but um, yeah, there's data that's coming out. I urge you to look at the data and decide for yourself. But if you look at the limits to growth, it was a paper that was written, or a book that was written in 1972 by the Club of Rome. It talks about the planet's carrying capacity and steps that need to be made. Those, if you think about 9/11, if you think about all the things that cause all the wars that we're seeing every 80 years, where it's a seculum. In that book, Generations, we talked about we're in the fourth turning. The last time 80 years ago was the end of World War II, where tens of millions of people died. 80 years before that, the seculum before that, was 1865. That was the end of the American Civil War. But also during that period, there were multiple conflicts that were going on, including in Europe, in Mexico, when Napoleon III invaded Mexico, basically killing hundreds of thousands of people. Hundreds of thousands of people died in kind of the German Civil War, basically German unification wars, and a number of other wars in Europe. The Taiping Rebellion from 1850 to 1864, millions of people died. The Russians displaced the Circassians, murdered or displaced 1 to 1.5 million people. So in the 1860s, tens of millions of people also died. So this is a culling, and that's what the elites are doing, and they're ushering in a new world order. These things happen in cycles every 80 years, and this whole Charlie Kirk thing was meant to divide. It was meant to increase the carnage. So just avoid crazy people, avoid large crowds, and you should be okay. Don't allow your emotions to stir you up. And one thing, I'm not going to say too much about it, but if crazy leftists hadn't caused me to lose my job about 4 years ago, for using military language and offending females, is effectively why I lost it. Okay, so I hate these people with every fiber of my being, but I'm not reacting because I've hated them for 4 years, because they personally targeted me and my family. And I will never, ever, ever forget that. So these people are crazy. They can't be reasoned with. They can't be bargained with. They are not human as far as I'm concerned. So all I'm telling you is avoid them like the plague, and just mind your own business, and do not be stirred by emotions. Okay. So, and I'll just leave it at that. And I'm not going to get too excited, because I've had 4 years to suppress the rage that I feel toward these people. So for me, the whole Charlie Kirk thing was just Yeah, these people are irrational nut jobs, and that's just this is just what they do. This is just what they do. But don't lash out because not everybody on the left is a raving lunatic. It's just the raving lunatics are the ones that design policy and are, in charge on that side. So again, do not let the be the better angel, okay? Let the better angels of your nature drive what you're doing because we're here to learn and we're here to get through this. So anyway, let's see. All right, I've like lost my place. There's a lot of comments. Oh yeah, there's some good comments, but I just got to find out where we are. Okay, here we go. Yeah, Tulsi is definitely learning a lot, John. Yep, Tulsi Gabbard is amazing. Yeah, that's right, Tim. Because that's why this is not necessarily left versus right. This is just an excuse for people to call for a clampdown from the security state. That's what it's about. They want people on the right being like, let's get the government to clamp down and this, like, no, we don't want that. We don't want that. In fact, I have a friend who's a retired Army colonel. He was saying this, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if you really want that. I think that's the point, right? To surrender more liberties to the people who are really behind this. Yeah, spiritual ascension, the majority of them are too far gone. And it's just that it's also, well, again, I'm not going to get into, I don't want to be accused of medical disinformation, which, yeah, I don't want to touch it. But you're right. And it's not because, and it's not necessarily from natural means, right? On a spiritual level, but also on a biochemical level, let's just say. Okay, Kusama, we need to wake up and not fight each other. Better to keep going with our lives. 100%. 100%. Fred writes, it was sobering to find out how many psychopaths are among us. I think a lot of people who aren't political got their eyes opened. Keep in mind, a lot of those people are bots. A lot of those people are being driven by foreign nation states that want us to do a lot of this stuff. So, but I knew that 4 years ago. So it's nothing new to me. Just stay frosty. That's all I can tell people. Yeah, spiritual ascension, order through chaos, or better termed, a dominance through chaos. Earthkeeper says absolutely correct. Spider Bite writes, it's the jinn black magic instilled in the Quran. Logan Clark writes, spot on, Sean, it's to divide and distract. Woo Riders DG, unfortunately, this all is planned well in advance. Every move the global cabal makes is calculated. 100%. Not enough people have been culled yet, so they're trying to do everything they can to do that. Spiderbite writes, the texts literally spell them, and it makes them cover up and fight. Kusama Gaming says, it looks to me like they're trying to aim for the... Yeah, well, they're trying to destroy the major Western powers because the major Western powers consume the most resources per capita, right? So that's why you had the events of 2020 to force people to, take actions against their own personal interest. But they're also doing the same thing in Britain. It's just in Britain, the left holds more sway there. So as a result, they're just like, it's painful to watch the death of a nation, but that's what's happening in Britain right now. Spiritual Ascension says the satanic agenda is to make Islam the one world religion. It will become illegal to preach the gospel. Yeah, good luck with that in the United States. And that's the other thing too. That's why all these mass shootings are happening, because they want people to give up their weapons, right? And that's the first thing that happens before people lose their sovereignty, because they can't defend themselves. So just These bad things are going to happen. It's not the guns, it's the people who are the puppet masters behind the scenes pushing these people and controlling narratives on mainstream media that are encouraging these people to go crazy. Like, we live in an open air asylum right now because we closed all the mental health institutions and are, medicating these people with stuff that causes them to dissociate. At least that's an argument. Okay. I got to be careful about this stuff. Spider Bite Wise. Oh my God. Coffee's so expensive now. Yeah. I hope they fail. Good will always prevail, but I think they plan these things in cycles. Tim Beck says bio-Leninism, useful idiots. In regard to your comment on the targeting of your family, I know, bud. Sirius says, I like how some suddenly change sides. Yeah, because they've been browbeaten into accepting this nonsense. Right? Like, for me, I don't care anymore. Like, they did what they were going to do to me. Like, so, and I hate them for it. And there will be no reconciliation as far as I'm concerned. But that doesn't mean, it just means I just avoid them. I want to have nothing to do with them. They're just trouble. So you just don't associate with them and you'll be fine. Interesting. Scott Ian saying pineal gland's gone. So out of all the people we see killed, I think Charlie's assassination was so disturbing because it wasn't just a death. We witnessed a clear act of evil, and that is why his death was awful. But that's the point. That's the point of why it was supposed to be awful, to enrage people. Well, yeah, Gray Owl, we are all going to die. Yep, Jalal. Today, millions turned out in Britain, Ireland, Australia. No violence. I didn't see Ireland or Australia, but a bunch of friends were sending me images of the turnout. Good evening, Gray Owl. Okay, so Woo Riders DG News just broke that when Israel's leader visited Trump, Israeli agents planted electronic devices on Trump's Secret Service vehicles. Secret Service found the devices. Is this true? Not sure, but news broke. I mean, look, it's the Mossad, right? So yeah, probably. I'd say probably. On the SM crackdown. So John Kurtzreich, Australia just followed Britain on the SM crackdown. What's SM crackdown mean? I don't know what SM means. Tim Beck, well then let's have fun and shake up a bit. Okay. Yeah, I'm not going to comment on religions. I just want to, because I don't. Islam and say like Wahhabist Islam in Saudi Arabia is very different from Sufi Islam and wherever they practice Sufi Islam. So they're different flavors, and I don't want to comment on an entire religion. Good to see you, Grea. Tim Beck writes to Jalea, how organic, holistic was it? I like it superficially, but too orchestrated for my intuition. Yeah, it was very orchestrated. Problem with England is run by lizards, spider bite. Okay. Oh, social media. Wait, so what are they doing with social media in England? Oh, they're just cracking down on it? Oh yeah, just follow Britain on the social media. Yeah, it's just yeah. I'm not saying that word. I'm just gonna scroll right by it. Okay. So there's a video on the Future Forecasting Group by Dick Algeier where he goes through who runs the world. Okay. So just think of it as the International Bank of Settlements administers the world through a series of trusts, and the trusts own LLCs or corporations. Those corporations are what we call nation states. So Trump is basically the CEO of a LLC owned by a trust. The trusts are administered by the International Bank of Settlements. The trusts are controlled by the nobility. Okay, this is what Dick Algire's remote viewed or been told. Okay, I'm not endorsing this. There's no way for me to corroborate it. I'm just passing this along. And then, according to this worldview, if you watch the future forecasting video from Dick Algire, the nobility basically reports into the Vatican. The Vatican reports up to whatever created us. And I'm not talking God. I'm talking like another species that we may look like, but we do not possess remotely the same capabilities. And that species has been here longer than us and also has an off-world presence. So I don't know if that's true or real. I just know it explains everything, right? Where you have a kind of a garden, and sometimes you have to weed the garden, and that's what's happening right now. The carrying capacity of the planet. So they argue in this limits to growth document they wrote in 1972, the Club of Rome, that the carrying capacity of the planet could be overwhelmed. There'll be less food for everybody. So these people who are in control are orchestrating a lot of this stuff. And in order for them to kind of reshape the world, reshape the financial system, which is also coming, which involves cryptocurrency, blockchain. Blockchain is called a chain for a reason. You're gonna see this stuff, and 60% of the population of the Western world was forced or willingly walked right into, biological changes. So what you're seeing in kind of Lynn Buchanan's remote viewing, Stephen Schwartz's remote viewing, the die may have already been cast. So it is what it is. I don't think there's much people can do right now except just use discernment when hearing things from an official capacity. Just assume what you're told is ask yourself what is the motivation of the institution telling you to do something, and ask what they have to gain. And also look at through the framing lens that the elite think that there are too many people. And how would you manage the herd? What steps would you take? Particularly when AI is already on the verge of replacing most entry-level jobs, will probably replace most white-collar jobs in the next 2 to 5 years. AI combined with automated machines or automated robots will replace most blue-collar jobs in about 5 to 10 years. So what are all those humans going to do? So that's the context right now. So you can only expect more uncertainty, more social unrest as the jobs start diminishing and disappearing. So I hope it doesn't happen that way. I hope people are thinking through this problem. Like, I am not a universal basic income guy. I think normally I'd say it's a terrible idea, but now I think you have to explore things like that to, account for people just not having jobs anymore. Right? We can either thrive or die. And if you just look at everything that's happening, it's pretty creepy stuff. Fertility is declining through either choice, psychological sterilization, as I mentioned earlier, or just other sterilization programs. And you can figure out what vector that may have taken. But I'm not gonna suggest any hypotheses because it's too dangerous, frankly. Okay. Spiritual Ascension says Jesus is king. Logan Clark, they're doing this, they're doing that. Who are they? The nobility, the people in charge, the people behind the scenes controlling the strings, what people they call the elite. So you like the well, I'm not going to say any specific thing because, but at the ultimate end of the day, there's something behind humanity and above humanity that's managing this stuff. Call them NHI, call them the stuff you see in the skies, like they've been here a very long time. And we are a resource. And that's what I've been told. I don't know if that's true. I can't verify it. But it sure explains a hell of a lot. That's why we never have disclosure. It's why things every 80 years, like clockwork, every seculum, we end up in the fourth turning. It's like it's managed. It's like a managed like weed killing. Yep, prohibiting speech 100%. You can see it right here. I am self-censoring. The lizard people always ruin the picnic. Yep. Well, particularly in Britain, like it is like British government is fascist. I mean, it's just it's out of control over there. You try to do some of the things that they're doing over in Britain, you would have an armed rebellion in the United States. Oh, oh yeah. Thank you, Jalal Jalal. Oh, they posted my interview on because I posted that same thing on my channel as well. Although I had to censor mine because it like gave me limited monetization, and then I challenged it, and they said, "Okay, it's fine." But at that point, I had already created a uncensored and then a censored version. Yeah, the Elohim, probably, yeah, that's probably exactly what they are. Future forecasting, Nancy. Okay. Okay. So Pix is saying, safe for a couple areas, the entire planet is not even reproducing at replacement rates. Overpopulation is not a real problem. How we live is. Uh, well, it is now. We're peaking now, but you're right. Like in the Western world, particularly, you're going to see a quick, and also in countries like China, where they have an aging population. So that's part of the problem. But in Africa, I mean, the population is growing very quickly. Yep, The Limits of Growth is a Club of Rome book. That's 100% right, Earthkeeper. Yeah, that synopsis of Jason Giorgiani. He says other stuff too that I've also heard independently, which I'm not even going to mention here because I'll sound crazy. I will sound absolutely batshit because I don't even know if I believe it. But there've been like, yeah, interesting. Lloyd Pye speculated second and third chromosomes fused. Turned out it was true from 48 to 46. 46 and 2. Yeah, that's a great song, by the way, by Tool. One of my favorite bands. You got to say more about that, Jalal Jalal. So Catholic Church heavily invested in gain of function. All right, it is if you give your power away to an egregore. Yep, Opus Dei has a lot of power. Gray Alps writes, Sean, do the future forecasting cats associate those overlords as Nordics or future breakaway civ or anything more? Breakaway civilization is also potentially an element. There are things that potentially happened during World War II that the history that we've been taught may not necessarily be the history as written as happened. Yeah. Well, yeah, I think Dick Allgire's correct because there's really you can either eliminate the population or you can mitigate the issues of or both. So, yeah, I think UBI is probably going to happen. Let's see. Man, I got to get my thing started because people are like, "Where's Andrija Puharich?" And it's been half an hour. So, here, let me just go quickly through this. Well, game theory is real. That's people won the Nobel Prize for it. 2 years ago, the channel was better. Now it's full of fear mongering. Which channel? This channel? Alfred Hitchcock. It's hard not to feel bleak hopelessness. How do you keep going, Sean? I just focus on what I can control. And that's all you can do. Just focus on what you control. Try not to be a part of the problem, try to be part of the solution. Okay. Yeah, Kusama. I said I still love their show and paying member, but cautious about what to believe. Yeah, you have to use your own discernment. The problem is most institutions are lying to us now. So you have to look behind. You have to kind of think through what the intention of it. Okay. Oh wow, an ancient radiation. Chernobyl animals have turned on an ancient radiation protection regime for real. John Kurtz writes. Okay. Okay. All right. I got to get started because people who don't follow this channel and don't know anything about me, they're like, I'm here for Andrija Puharich. So I got to get started on this. But this is good stuff. So let's, of course, when I click on this thing, it's not popping up. Bear with me. The hell is this? Here we go. Okay. Andrija Puharich, occult involvement, extraterrestrial theories, and psychic research. Andrija Puharich, 1918 to 1995, was an American medical doctor, inventor, and pioneering parapsychological researcher whose life bridged conventional science and the occult. Best known for bringing high-profile psychics like Peter Hurkos and Uri Geller to the attention of researchers, Puharich immersed himself in explorations of psychic phenomena and occult practices at a time when such topics straddled the boundary between scientific curiosity and the esoteric fringe. Over the course of his career, he conducted laboratory experiments with famed mediums, investigated psychedelic substances and shamanic rituals, engaged with secretive spiritual circles, and even promoted theories of extraterrestrial contact with humanity. This show provides a comprehensive overview of Puharich's life and work, emphasizing his connection to occult practices, secretive groups such as the mysterious Council of Nine, theories involving otherworldly beings, and research into psychic abilities. Context from mid-20th century cultural and scientific trends is included to situate Puharich's activities with their historical framework, or within their historical framework. Early life and medical background. Born as Henry Karl Puharich on February 19th, 1918 in Chicago, to Yugoslav or Croatian immigrant parents, Puharich was raised in Illinois during the interwar period. Nicknamed Andrija by his family, he later formally adopted his Slavic first name in his professional life. Puharich showed early aptitude in both the sciences and humanities. He completed an undergraduate degree in philosophy with a minor in pre-medicine at Northwestern University in 1943 and went on to earn his Doctor of Medicine, MD, from Northwestern University's medical school in 1947. Following medical school and a residency in internal medicine in California, the young physician served in the U.S. Army Medical Corps during the early 1950s. This dual grounding in rigorous scientific training and military discipline would form the backdrop for his later unconventional, let's say, pursuits. Even as a medical officer, Puharich's interests leaned toward the fringes of human consciousness and psychology. By the time he was an Army captain, he was already delivering lectures and papers on the potential military applications of extrasensory perception, or ESP, and psychic phenomena. In November 1952, for example, he presented a classified paper titled, quote, an evaluation of the possible usefulness of ESP in psychological warfare, end quote, to Pentagon officials. This indicates that from the outset of his career, Puharich saw paranormal phenomena not as mere superstition, but as a frontier of knowledge that might even confer strategic advantages. His openness to exploring the paranormal, combined with his medical credentials, soon positioned him as an intriguing, if controversial, figure at the intersection of science and the occult. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the Round Table Foundation and early occult research from 1948 to 1953. In 1948, after being discharged from active Army duty on medical grounds, Puharich embarked on an ambitious private research venture that would become the foundation of his early work in parapsychology. He established the Round Table Foundation in rural Glen Cove, Maine, a secluded setting where he could investigate psi phenomena away from the spotlight of mainstream academia. The choice of location was deliberate. A remote seaside estate named Warrenton was procured, and even a converted barn served as an initial laboratory space. With support from wealthy benefactors intrigued by paranormal research, including former U.S. Vice President Henry A. Wallace and philanthropist families like the Forbes and Astor dynasties, Puharich secured funding to equip his lab and hire assistants. Such patrons were themselves drawn to mystical and progressive ideas. Wallace, for instance, was known for his interest in theosophy and esoteric spirituality, thus providing Puharich not only money, but also entree into elite circles fascinated by the occult and mind sciences. At the Round Table Foundation, Puharich cultivated a scientific commune atmosphere that mixed cutting-edge research with an openness to the supernatural. Renowned medium Eileen J. Garrett, founder of the Parapsychology Foundation, was an early influence and collaborator. After Garrett allegedly discerned a health ailment of Puharich's with uncanny accuracy, he became convinced of the reality of telepathy and sought to study it under controlled conditions. By 1949, the Foundation's laboratory was staffed and running experiments that would have been considered highly unorthodox in traditional institutions. The writer Aldous Huxley, a notable intellectual interested in mysticism, visited Glen Cove in the early 1950s and vividly described the eclectic range of phenomena being tested. In a letter to Garrett, Huxley recounted the strange household assembled by Puharich, in which an array of curious characters and experiments coexisted. Quote, Eleanor Bond doing telepathic guessing remarkably well, Frances Farrelly with her diagnostic machine, which Puharich's tests have shown to be merely an instrument, like a crystal ball for concentrating ESP faculties. Harry, the Dutch sculptor who goes into trances in the Faraday cages and produces automatic scripts in Egyptian hieroglyphics. Narodny, the cockroach man who is preparing experiments to test the effects of human telepathy on insects. It was all very lively and amusing, and I really think promising, end quote. Huxley's bemused yet appreciative account illustrates how occult practices and scientific apparatus mingled freely in Puharich's laboratory. Within a single experimental milieu, one could find seance-like trance mediumship, complete with automatic writing and archaic scripts, being observed from within electromagnetic shielded Faraday cages, alongside attempts to detect telepathic influence on insects. This blending of spiritualism and science was emblematic of Puharich's approach. He was willing to employ the tools of modern technology, oscilloscopes, signal generators, physiological monitors, to probe age-old mystical questions about psychic ability and other realms of consciousness. It was an environment where shamans and scientists collaborated, reflecting Puharich's aim to reproduce by modern pharmacological, electronic, and physical methods, the conditions used by the shamans for getting into a state of traveling clairvoyance. During these early years, Puharich's research encompassed a variety of psi phenomena. He tested telepathic transmissions of thoughts and images, often with one person attempting to send an image to a receiver in another room or inside a shielded enclosure. He examined devices like Farrelly's diagnostic machine, which was purported to aid clairvoyant diagnosis of illness, finding that its efficacy likely came from heightening the operator's concentration, much as a crystal ball might, rather than any intrinsic power of the device. Additionally, Puharich began collecting and experimenting with psychoactive substances that might alter consciousness in ways that enhance ESP. This included an interest in hallucinogenic mushrooms, as discussed further later in this podcast, foreshadowing his later work, The Sacred Mushroom. The Round Table Foundation thus became a magnet for individuals with unusual talents or theories, not only prominent sensitives like Garrett and Dutch, clairvoyant Peter Hurkos, but also inventors, artists, and even non-human subjects. For example, the insects enlisted by the so-called cockroach man in telepathy trials. Importantly, from the beginning, the Foundation operated with a degree of secrecy and security, in part because of the controversial nature of its work, and in part due to covert military interest. Documents and later investigations revealed that the U.S. Army and possibly other agencies kept a close eye on Puharich's activities. In fact, the Foundation received covert funding from the Army during the early 1950s, and senior Army officials, including the head of psychological warfare research, paid visits to Glen Cove. This overlapped with Puharich's own return to active military service. In 1953, he was recommissioned and stationed at the Army's Chemical Center in Edgewood, Maryland, a facility deeply involved in chemical and psychological warfare research. Notably, Edgewood Arsenal was at the time engaged in MK-Ultra experiments in collaboration with the CIA, exploring drugs like LSD as potential mind control or truth serum agents. The coincidence of Puharich's tenure at Edgewood from 1953 to 1955, with the height of MK-Ultra's secret psychedelic drug trials, has led some historians to speculate that his private psi research might have been entwined.
Unknown caller.
Sorry, somebody who knows I'm online right now just called anyway. And I may have lost my sound. I'm going to keep talking. Let me just check to make sure that people can still hear me. Yeah. Hopefully you all can still hear me. So let me just keep going. Okay, to speculate that his private psi research might have been entwined with military projects, or even that his honorable discharge and subsequent redrafting were orchestrated to allow Army oversight of his work. Puharich himself later claimed on a 1987 television appearance that as early as 1954, he had been conducting LSD experiments for the CIA, though concrete documentation of this remains elusive. What is clear is that by the mid-1950s, Puharich occupied a strange dual role, a civilian parapsychologist running a semi-private occult lab funded by both wealthy mystics and shadowy defense interests, and simultaneously an Army doctor involved in cutting-edge and ethically murky mind sciences. This unique position set the stage for one of the most extraordinary episodes of his career, the alleged contact with a group of otherworldly intelligences known only as the Nine. The Seances of the Nine and Occult Channeling, 1952 to 1953. Among the various occult experiences at the Round Table Foundation, none would prove more fateful or controversial than the series of channeling sessions that began in late 1952. Puharich had invited to his laboratory a learned Indian mystic, Dr. D.G. Vinod, who was reputed to enter trance states and convey profound spiritual teachings. On the night of December 31st, 1952, as the story goes, Dr. Vinod was placed in a trance during a small gathering at Glen Cove. Precisely at 9 p.m., Vinod suddenly began to speak in an oracular tone, delivering a message that stunned those present. Quote, "We are 9 principles and forces," end quote, he announced. The voice coming through Vinod, identifying only as we, a collective, declared that 9 entities were manifesting through him. Over subsequent sittings in early 1953, these mysterious communicators would be collectively referred to as the 9. The content of the communications via Vinod was an exotic blend of lofty spiritual philosophy and scientific verbiage. The 9 spoke as a unified intelligence composed of 9 parts, claiming essentially godlike status. Quote, "God is nobody else than we together, the 9 principles of God. There is no God other than what we are together," end quote, they proclaimed in one session. That's pretty creepy. They presented themselves as the ultimate governing force of the universe, with lesser cosmic messengers carrying out their will. Intriguingly, one of the voices speaking through Vinod, identifying itself by the initial M, also dictated an abstruse mathematical formulation related to the Lorentz-Einstein transformation, which is an equation from relativity theory. This unexpected mix of spiritual declarations with advanced scientific concepts made a strong impression on Puharich and his colleagues. It suggested, at least to the believers, that the source of these messages possessed knowledge beyond that of the entranced medium. The seances of the 9 continued periodically for about 6 months. A particularly momentous sitting took place on June 27th, 1953, just after Puharich had returned from a hiatus spent on army duty. On that day, a circle of 9 human participants, perhaps symbolically mirroring the 9 entities, gathered to hear the latest revelations. Among them were several notable figures who had been drawn into Puharich's orbit. Arthur M. Young, a prominent inventor, philosopher, who was the developer of the Bell helicopter and a man with avid interests in metaphysics. His wife, Ruth Forbes Young, of the illustrious Forbes family, and Alice Bovary, an heiress of the Astor family. This involvement of such high society individuals underscores how secretive occult circles and elite social networks intersected in this milieu. In this close gathering, Vinod once more channeled the collective voice of the 9. The messages reinforced the earlier theme that the 9 were essentially a plurality comprising the divine unity, directly related to man's concept of God, as Puharich later described it. The 9 spoke in a tone of cosmic authority, yet significantly, they did not explicitly identify themselves as extraterrestrial beings during the Vinod phase. They remained enigmatic, divine principles guided the universe, but their exact nature or origin was left mysterious. For Puharich and the inner circle at Roundtable, these communications were profoundly affecting. Puharich treated the messages with seriousness and recorded transcripts for his files. Martin Gardner, a skeptic who later reviewed Puharich's accounts, noted that, quote, "With the exception of Dr. Andrija Puharich, not a single recognized psychic investigator has been impressed," end quote, with these sessions, implying that Puharich stood virtually alone among researchers in accepting the extraordinary claims at face value. Indeed, Puharich seemed convinced that something genuinely supernatural or supernormal had occurred in the manifestation of the 9. Ever the integrator of science and mysticism, he even speculated whether these entities might represent a higher reality behind all religions, or perhaps a higher intelligence communicating through hyperspace. Okay. Although Dr. Vinod returned to India in mid-1953, bringing an end to the initial phase of the 9's messages, the episode did not fade from Puharich's mind. On the contrary, it became a touchstone for much of his later endeavors. In the short term, Puharich soon encountered what he interpreted as independent corroboration of the 9's reality. While traveling in Mexico in 1956 on another project, Puharich and Arthur Young met an American couple, Charles and Lillian Lofhead, who were working with a young man claiming psychic contact with extraterrestrials. After the chance meeting, the Lofheads mailed Puharich a packet of purported messages from these alien communicators. To Puharich's astonishment, the letters referred explicitly to the 9 and even cited the very date of Vinod's first contact, along with the same esoteric physics references that had been produced in Maine. In other words, entirely separate mediums in a different country appeared to be channeling the identical group of 9 entities. Puharich took this as powerful evidence that the nine were not an artifact of Dr. Vinod's subconscious or a contrivance of the round table circle, but rather an objective cosmic force reaching out to multiple people. Skeptics might counter that Puharich or Jung could have somehow influenced the Lofthead group's ideas, or that the overlap was coincidental, but to believers, it was a validation of the nine. Another development around this time gave the nine a further extraterrestrial dimension. The Lofthead's trance subject described various alien races and suggested the nine were associated with intelligences from other planets. Puharich himself began to speculate that the nine could be linked to the rising UFO phenomenon. It did not escape his notice that the first modern wave of UFO sightings, Kenneth Arnold's famous report of flying saucers in 1947, involved 9 unidentified objects. In hindsight, Puharich would ask the nine via later channels if they were behind the UFO sightings since 1947, to which they allegedly answered yes. The nine's cryptic proclamation of cosmic authority thus gradually morphed into a narrative in which they were otherworldly beings, possibly guiding human destiny and making their presence known through phenomena like UFOs. By the late 1950s, the initial saga of the nine went quiet. The Round Table Foundation itself did not last far beyond that era. By 1958, funding for Puharich's main lab had dwindled, and he eventually disbanded the foundation to resume a more conventional medical career for a time. However, the concept of the nine did not disappear. It remained a secret thread through Puharich's subsequent undertakings, resurfacing dramatically in the 1970s. Decades later, observers looking back, notably authors Lynn Pickett and Clive Prince, would question whether Puharich might have created the nine intentionally as part of a belief system or even a psychological experiment. They pointed to Puharich's connection with mystic organizations and theosophical circles, for instance. He and Dr. Vinod both wrote for a journal associated with the Lucis Trust, a theosophist group around the same time. These analysts wondered if the nine were perhaps a syncretic product of Puharich's own spiritual and intellectual milieu, which drew on Eastern mysticism, Western occultism, and cutting-edge science fiction-like ideas. Puharich, for his part, always maintained that the nine were quite real and that his role was merely that of investigator and facilitator for these higher powers. All right, just moving along, mid-century explorations, shamanism, psychedelics, and psychic healing from 1958 to 1965. With the close of the Round Table Foundation in the late 1950s, Puharich pivoted to new avenues of inquiry. Though he never stayed far from paranormal themes, for a short period, he returned to more routine medical practice, but soon he was drawn back into research, this time delving into ancient and indigenous sources of occult knowledge. A major focus of Puharich's in the early 1960s was the study of shamanic practices and psychoactive plants that could potentially enhance psychic abilities. This culminated in one of his best-known books, The Sacred Mushroom, Key to the Door of Eternity, which was published in 1959. This book detailed his investigations into hallucinogenic mushrooms and their effects on ESP. In 1960, Puharich traveled to Mexico to learn firsthand from local shamanic traditions. He participated in rituals of the Chitino people of southern Mexico, which involved ingesting psilocybin mushrooms regarded as sacred within those communities. Through these guided psychedelic experiences, Puharich hoped to experience altered states similar to those of shamans and thereby possibly induce or amplify telepathic connection. His findings, a blend of ethnography, neuropharmacology, and psi experimentation, suggested to him that certain mushrooms could indeed act as a catalyst for paranormal phenomenon or doorways to other realms of consciousness. The Sacred Mushroom recounted these adventures in a semi-autobiographical style, describing astonishing episodes where, under the influence of the fungus, Puharich and others reportedly shared mental images or assessed information they could not have known normally. The book was written during a time when the West was just becoming aware of psychedelic substances. The work of R. Gordon Wasson on Mexican magic mushrooms had only recently been published. and it contributed to the burgeoning interest in psychedelics as tools for psychic research. Puharich's willingness to experiment on himself in these shamanic ceremonies highlighted his hands-on approach. He was not a detached observer, but rather a participant, eager to send people to explore systematically the other world by any means that would work. Parallel to his psychedelic research, Puharich continued investigating individuals reputed to have extraordinary healing or psychic powers. One prominent case was the Brazilian psychic surgeon, José Pedro de Freitas, better known as Zé Arrigo. Arrigo performed surgery-like procedures on patients without anesthesia, ostensibly guided by a spirit of a deceased doctor. In the early 1960s, Puharich traveled to Brazil to observe Arrigo in action. Despite the seemingly crude and unorthodox methods, Arrigo famously used kitchen knives or even rusty tools to scrape at patients' bodies. Many patients claimed miraculous cures. Puharich was impressed after witnessing numerous operations. He judged Arrigo's abilities as genuine and medically inexplicable. He even wrote an afterword to Arrigo's biography in 1974, lending his name in support of the healer's legitimacy. This pattern of investigating controversial healers and psychics firsthand was a hallmark of Puharich's style. He would embed himself in the scenario, apply as much scientific measurement as possible. He often brought along instruments to record brainwaves or other physiological data and then draw conclusions. In Arrigo's case, as in others, Puharich tended to give the benefit of the doubt to the reality of the phenomena, though he acknowledged that mainstream science remained unconvinced. His credulity earned him criticism. One paranormal encyclopedia later noted that with the exception of Dr. Andrija Puharich, not a single recognized psychic investigator has been impressed with Horkos's or similar psychics' performances. During this period, Puharich also forged connections with various countercultural and intellectual figures interested in consciousness. He was friends with people like Aldous Huxley, as noted, and philosopher Gerald Heard. In 1963, he met a young Israeli-raised inventor named Itzhak Bentov. This is the Stalking the Wild Pendulum author, who, if you go to you'll find it. Just search my channel for Stalking the Wild Pendulum. I summarized that book. It's a great book. You should all read it. So Itzhak Bentov, who shared interest in biofeedback and meditation. Bentov would become a close collaborator a decade later in experiments with Uri Geller. Puharich's circle of contacts was diverse, spanning academic scientists, artists, mystics, and even former intelligence officers, reflecting the cross-pollination between the psychedelic counterculture and Cold War technoscience. It was not unusual, for instance, that in the same year, Puharich might present at a prestigious conference on parapsychology and also quietly consult for some military think tank on brain stimulation devices. This dual identity persisted throughout his career. It should also be noted that Puharich achieved recognition as a prolific inventor and technologist during the 1960s. Far from being dismissed as a crank, he secured over 50 patents in the U.S. and abroad. One of his notable inventions was a novel type of hearing aid, a small radio transducer that could be attached to a person's tooth, transmitting sound via the teeth and cranial nerves directly to the inner ear. This so-called tooth radio could allow a person to receive audio signals without using their outer ears at all, a concept that later became a staple of stage mentalism acts, where a performer with a hidden tooth implant could seemingly receive telepathic messages. Puharich's work in neurophysiology and biocybernetics also included devices for electrical stimulation of the brain to enhance cognitive performance, potentially induce altered states. His inventive success gave him a measure of mainstream credibility and provided financial means through the Electron Corporation, which he formed to market some devices to support his less conventional projects. It also demonstrated how he attempted to marry technology with the paranormal, a theme that reappears in later experiments with electromagnetic fields and psychic warfare. By the mid-1960s, Andrija Puharich had thus established himself as a kind of Renaissance man of the paranormal. He had delved into occult philosophy via the Nine, explored indigenous mysticism and psychedelics, tested psychics and faith healers, and invented gadgetry that stretched the imagination. All of these endeavors were animated by a core belief that human consciousness had untapped potentials, powers that ancient wisdom and modern science could jointly help unlock. This set the stage for the most high-profile chapter of his life, his collaboration with Israeli psychic Uri Geller in the early 1970s, which would catapult Puharich into international notoriety and further intertwine his pursuits with extraterrestrial lore and secretive agencies. All right, the Uri Geller saga, spoon-bending and space intelligences, 1971 to 1974. In 1971, Andrija Puharich's quest for the genuine psychic talent led him to Uri Geller, a young Israeli performer whose startling demonstrations of metal bending, telepathy, and other paranormal feats were making waves in Israel. Geller, then in his mid-20s, had a rising reputation for being able to bend spoons with his mind, start broken watches, and perform accurate remote viewing style clairvoyance, though many were skeptical, suspecting clever magic tricks. Puharich was introduced to Geller through an Israeli army officer and inventor, Itzhak Harry Bentov, who we talked about earlier, during a visit to Tel Aviv. Intrigued, Puharich arranged a meeting and began a careful evaluation of Geller's abilities. What followed was an intense period of collaboration and experimentation that would alter both men's lives. After some preliminary tests convinced Puharich that Geller indeed had remarkable gifts, he invited Geller to the United States and became his mentor and scientific advocate. Over late 1971 and into 1972, Puharich conducted a series of controlled experiments with Geller, often in the presence of other researchers like Dr. Walter Orr Roberts and engineer Arthur Young. They documented instances of Geller allegedly telekinetically bending metal objects without physical force, describing hidden drawings, telepathy, or clairvoyance, and affecting sensitive scientific incidents, phenomena that Puharich felt could not be explained by trickery. These events alone would have been noteworthy, but it was the stranger occurrences during this period that truly left Puharich convinced that unearthly forces were at play. Crucially, Puharich made frequent use of hypnosis as a tool in probing Geller's inner psychic world. Under deep trance induced by Puharich, Uri Geller began to reveal a fantastical personal narrative. He recounted an early childhood incident in which he saw a radiant UFO-like light and encountered a shining entity at age 3. Furthermore, while hypnotized, Geller occasionally would seemingly channel a voice or intelligence separate from himself, speaking in English, not his native Hebrew, and delivering messages for Puharich. In one dramatic hypnotic session, a stern, disembodied voice announced that Geller had been programmed as a child by extraterrestrials, and that Puharich had been selected to guide and protect him. This entity introduced itself as part of a conscious computer aboard a spacecraft named Spectra, located somewhere in outer space. That kind of sounds like Jack Sarfati, Dr. Jack Sarfati's telephone call in 1953. Anyway, the Spectra intelligence declared that alien beings had given Geller his powers for a mission on Earth, even calling him a chosen messiah for an imminent new era. Puharich, witnessing these pronouncements, was reminded instantly of the 9. He directly asked the entranced Geller's channeled voice, "Are you of the 9 principles that once spoke through Dr. Vinod?" The answer came unequivocally yes. With that, Puharich became convinced that Spectra and Huva, another name that emerged for the supervising alien group, were indeed the same Council of 9 he had met in 1953, now returning via a new medium. Over the next months, this situation escalated in what could only be described as a real-life science fiction drama. Puharich and Geller reported experiencing a cascade of paranormal phenomena surrounding the Spectra communications. They claimed to see multiple UFOs over the Tel Aviv area and in the Sinai Desert during times Geller was in contact with Spectra. They witnessed objects spontaneously materializing and dematerializing in sealed rooms, classic poltergeist-like events, including famously Puharich's own dog seemingly teleporting through solid walls. Metallic voices without visible sources spoke out of thin air on several occasions, delivering cryptic instructions or comments. All of this was, in Puharich's words, a confusion of oddly monotonous miracles, quoting writer Colin Wilson. The activity sometimes bordered on the absurd. Tape recorders that Puharich set up to capture the spectre messages would either erase themselves or the tapes would vanish inexplicably, leaving only Puharich's handwritten transcripts as evidence. According to Puharich, even Geller himself was once teleported a short distance, a claim greeted with understandable skepticism by scientists. Geller, for his part, grew ambivalent about these high strangeness episodes. Publicly, in his later writings, Uri Geller distanced himself from the more extreme space alien narrative. He never denied that paranormal phenomenon happened around him, but he came to refer to the spectra and Huva entities as possibly a, quote, civilization of clowns, end quote, implying they might have been trickster forces rather than literal extraterrestrials. He expressed discomfort that the sensational alien story overshadowed his genuine psychic talents. In private, Geller acknowledged that under hypnosis he said those things, but he suggested they may have been a kind of subconscious dramatization. Puharich, however, remained largely a true believer in the authenticity of the spectral communications, at least at the time. This divergence would eventually lead to a strain and partial estrangement between the two men. Before that break, however, Puharich was instrumental in boosting Geller's fame and in trying to get scientific validation for his abilities. In the summer of 1972, Puharich brought Uri Geller to the Stanford Research Institute in California to undergo rigorous testing by physicists Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, who were conducting ESP research with some CIA funding at that time. Through Puharich's connections, notably Apollo 14 astronaut Edgar Mitchell, who was interested in consciousness studies, Geller was accepted as a test subject at SRI. Over several weeks, Geller was tested in controlled conditions. He successfully reproduced hidden drawings made by researchers in another room, influenced magnetic instruments, and continued to demonstrate psychokinesis on small objects, according to published SRI reports. The SRI experiments became controversial, drawing both acclaim from parapsychologists impressed by the protocols and criticism from skeptics like James Rand, who suspected trickery. Nevertheless, they made Geller an international sensation and, by extension, lent some credence to Puharich's long-standing assertion that psychic phenomena were real and could be studied scientifically. Behind the scenes, there were hints of intelligence agency interest in these proceedings. Years later, Geller would claim that he had in fact worked for Israeli intelligence, i.e. the Mossad, and that the Americans were evaluating him for potential psychic espionage utility. In an interview, Geller also said, "I believe the whole thing with Andrija was financed by the American Defense Department." Puharich himself, given his background, may have been serving as a talent scout of sorts on behalf of U.S. agencies, essentially monitoring Geller for the CIA or Army. Indeed, one of Puharich's acquaintances, physicist Jack Sarfati, later confirmed that Puharich was associated with CIA-affiliated programs during that period. This underscores how deeply entwined the occult and espionage worlds were in the Cold War. A psychic experiment could simultaneously be a mythical quest and a potential military reconnaissance project. In 1974, Puharich published Uri, a journal of the mystery of Uri Geller, a book chronicling his experiences with Geller. The tone of the book was awestruck and apocalyptic. He recounted all the extraterrestrial communications in detail, portraying Geller as a harbinger of vast changes for humanity, and repeated Spectra's warnings that if mankind did not change its ways, disaster loomed. Puharich even asserted that superintelligent alien computers were sending messages through Geller to guide Earth's future. While the book found a popular readership fascinated by the paranormal, it elicited sharp criticism from the scientific community. Reviewers in journals like New Scientist lambasted the work as credulous and overly extravagant in its claims. Even some who believe in Geller's basic abilities felt Puharich had undermined the cause by embracing the most far-fetched narrative. As one wrote, Puharich believes every word he has written, but those who had hoped for a solid pro-psychic case would be disappointed. The noted skeptic James Randi later remarked that Puharich's theories were silly and that Yuri was both a boost to Geller's mythos and a millstone around his credibility. Indeed, Geller himself sought to put distance between his public image and Puharich's extraterrestrial saga once he became a celebrity. By mid-1973, Yuri Geller had moved on to pursue a career in entertainment and was less available to Puharich. The two parted ways on mixed terms, respectful, but Geller was now wary of the occult narrative that Puharich had woven around him. Yet for Puharich, the story was far from over. The departure of Geller did not bring an end to the influence of the Nine. If anything, Puharich doubled down on his involvement with this secretive, esoteric thread, ushering in a new phase where secret societies and elite believers took center stage. Lab 9 and the Council of Nine Resurgence, 1974 to 1978. Freed from managing Yuri Geller's burgeoning show business career, Puharich returned to concentrating on the Council of Nine, the mysterious entity that had first spoken through Dr. Vinod and had, in Puharich's view, reappeared via Spectra and the Geller episode. In the mid-1970s, he created a new informal research group dedicated to continuing the contact with the Nine and disseminating their message. The initiative came to be known as Lab 9, a somewhat secretive commune-cum laboratory that Puharich set up initially at his estate in Ossining, New Jersey, nicknamed the Turkey Farm, and later at a farm property in New Jersey. Lab 9 became the nucleus of a quiet occult movement attracting a number of wealthy and influential individuals who shared an interest in shadow and wisdom and global transformation. One of the first new channels Puharich recruited was a young American man pseudonymously named or called Bobby Horn. In 1974, Puharich hypnotized Horn and was able to induce a trance communication in which an entity named Corian spoke through him. Puharich quickly suggested that Corian was an emissary of the Nine, and the entranced Horn agreed. However, this experience proved psychologically disabling for the medium. Horn was reportedly pushed to the brink of suicide by the voices and visions he experienced, and he soon withdrew from the experiment. Undeterred, Puharich sought out other channels. He found a more long-term partner in Phyllis Schlemmer, an experienced trance medium, or transceiver as she was termed, who had a spirit guide she called Tom. In 1974, during a seance-like session facilitated by Puharich, Schlemmer's guide, Tom, revealed itself not to be the soul of her deceased grandfather, as she had assumed, but rather an extraterrestrial personality, indeed one of the Nine. This marked the formal reemergence of the Nine as an ongoing communication source, now often styled as the Council of Nine. Schlemmer, under Puharich's mentorship, maintained contact with the Nine for roughly 2 decades thereafter, delivering their teachings and prophetic messages. Lab 9's activities were twofold. First, there was a missionary aspect. Puharich and his close colleagues felt they needed to alert humanity to the existence and guidance of the Council of Nine. They believed that the Nine were preparing for an imminent return or manifestation, possibly through a mass landing of spacecraft to help humanity, but the people had to be spiritually readied. To that end, Puharich began enlisting notable figures to receive and spread the Nine's messages. One recruit was Sir John Whitmore, a British aristocrat, former race car champion turned spiritual seeker, who became a patron and collaborator in the Nine network. They organized gatherings where Schlemmer, as trance medium, would channel Tom in front of small invited audiences of scientists, wealthy businessmen, and even politicians, imparting cosmic advice. Perhaps the most famous participant drawn into these esoteric meetings was Gene Roddenberry. Yep, you heard me. Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek. In 1974 to 75, Roddenberry attended several Lab 9 sessions and was intrigued by the science fiction-like scenario of ancient aliens guiding Earth. At Puharich's urging, Roddenberry even drafted a film screenplay based on the Council of Nine, though the project was never completed. It is said that elements of the Nine's mythology influenced Roddenberry's later work. For instance, his 1990s TV series, Earth, Final Conflict, portrayed inscrutable alien mentors with dubious motives, somewhat reflective of the Nine narrative. During one session, Roddenberry himself asked the channeled Tom to clarify his identity, whereupon the being finally declared he was Atum, head of the great an Ennead of ancient Egyptian gods, or Aeneid. In other words, the Council of Nine directly linked themselves to the Aeneid of Egyptian mythology. 9 deities worshipped in Heliopolis, with Atum Ra as the creator god. This revelation neatly dovetailed with Puharich's own research. Back in the 1950s, after Vinod's initial messages, Puharich had indeed studied the symbolism of the Aeneid and suspected a connection. It was as if the 9 were now explicitly embracing an identity as age-old occult overseers of humanity, known to ancient civilizations and now returning in space-age guise. The second aspect of Lab 9's work was more experimental and more secretive at the time. Puharich has continued his long-standing interest in psychic abilities, now focusing on children and adolescents. In the summer of 1975, he assembled a group of about 20 young people, aged 9 to late teens, who were thought to possess latent psychic gifts. These youth, dubbed the Gellerlings or Space Kids, came from various parts of the world and were invited to stay at Puharich's estate in Ossining in a quasi-communal setting. With these Space Kids, Puharich conducted intensive training and experiments aimed at honing telepathic and psychokinetic abilities. According to Puharich's reports and later accounts by biographers, the children indeed displayed remarkable phenomena. They practiced remote viewing, attempted to mentally spy on distant locations. Puharich claimed their targets included high-priority Cold War sites like the Kremlin in Moscow and the White House in Washington. He further asserted that some of the kids could materialize objects out of thin air, even living things like trees, through psychic concentration. In an especially bold claim, Puharich said that 6 of the children arrived at his estate via teleportation, simply appearing on the property without traveling conventionally. Such extraordinary stories, if true, would rank among the most significant events in psychical research history, but tellingly, Puharich did not publicize them widely at the time. The Space Kids project was kept relatively low profile, perhaps to avoid media circus or interference by authorities. Indeed, an air of conspiracy soon enveloped it. In January 1977, Puharich did present some findings, likely in watered-down form, at a conference on mind over matter organized at Penn State University by his friend Ira Einhorn, a counterculture figure involved in paranormal circles. The very existence of psychic children being groomed for high-level clairvoyance inevitably raised eyebrows in certain quarters. One might note the parallel. The CIA and Army's own Project Stargate, the code name for their remote viewing program, was active at the same time, using adult subjects at SRI and elsewhere. Puharich's Space Kids could be seen as a private or off-the-books extension of similar research, perhaps allowing exploration of techniques that government researchers could not openly try on minors. Puharich himself later insinuated that some of the ultra-wealthy families and intelligence-connected people he knew were quietly supporting this work behind the scenes. The bold venture of Lab 9 came to an abrupt and dramatic end in 1978. In that year, a devastating fire broke out on Puharich's Ossining property, burning his house, the main site of Lab 9 activities, to the ground. The fire was determined to be caused by arson. Suspicion oddly fell on one of the Space Kids, a teenage participant who had been living there. The youth allegedly claimed that he had set the blaze because aliens were harassing him, and he could no longer cope. Puharich, however, saw a darker force at work. He publicly accused the CIA of orchestrating the arson to sabotage his research and to silence the Nine's message. He also stated that this was not the first attempt on his life or work. He claimed to have been the target of at least 4 assassination or sabotage efforts by clandestine agencies, presumably due to what he knew or the threat his findings posed. With his home and lab in ruins, Puharich fled the United States for a time. He went to Mexico and lived in relative obscurity for the next few years, effectively in exile from the high-intensity scene he had helped create. The late 1970s were not kind to some of Puharich's close associates either. Ira Einhorn, the organizer of the 1977 conference and a close ally of Puharich's, he had even lived on the Ossining property at times, was arrested in 1979 for the murder of his girlfriend, a crime for which he was later convicted. The scandal brought unwelcome attention to the fringe network Einhorn and Puharich inhabited. One theory posited by Puharich was that the CIA exploited the Einhorn case to indirectly discredit or pressure him, fearing revelations about the Space Kids or Nine cult might emerge in the course of investigations. With Lab 9 dissolved and his experiment in psychic children terminated, Puharich's most influential and controversial phase effectively concluded. What remained of the Council of Nine presence migrated to other hands. For example, Phyllis Schlemmer continued to channel Tom and even published a book, The Only Planet of Choice, 1993, with messages from the Nine. But Puharich himself receded from that leadership role. The secret society-like group that had formed around the Nine gradually faded in prominence, although whispers of its influence would occasionally surface in New Age circles and conspiracy theories. The Nine would later be cited as an inspiration by some ufology and occult groups, and speculative links have been drawn between the Nine and other quasi-mystical secret orders and esoteric lore. Later years and legacy, 1979 to 1995. After the tumult of the 1970s, Andrija Puharich lived a comparatively quieter life in the 1980s, though he remained engaged in research and invention until the end. By the early 1980s, he resettled in the United States and found patronage once again from a wealthy individual intrigued by his work. This time, Richard Josh Reynolds Jr., an heir to the R.J. Reynolds tobacco fortune. Reynolds invited Puharich to a sprawling estate in North Carolina in 1980, commissioning him to study the effects of electromagnetic fields on brainwaves in a secluded, well-equipped setting. This allowed Puharich to resume some of his earlier lines of inquiry into extremely low frequency, ELF, or ELF, electromagnetism, and its influence on humans' physiology and consciousness. Puharich had long been interested in ELF waves. He believed that such fields could interact with the mind, potentially even controlling moods or psychic abilities. And he had patented devices for blocking or converting ELF signals to protect people. On the Reynolds estate, alongside a couple of fellow scientists, Dr. Elizabeth Rauscher, a physicist, and engineer William Van Biesa, Puharich continued experiments in this domain through the 1980s. Publicly, Puharich kept a low profile during these years. One notable appearance was on the Geraldo TV show in 1987. Oh man, that brings back memories. Where he made a startling claim, as reported by researcher Terry Milner, concerning his involvement in earlier secret projects, possibly referencing the above-mentioned Navy psychic program, Project Penguin, or his allegations about CIA harassment. But largely, he avoided the limelight. Meanwhile, some of his ideas gained a second life in the flourishing New Age movement. For instance, conspiracies about weather control, electromagnetic weapons, and even theories that Nikola Tesla had communicated with extraterrestrials. All topics Puharich had touched on became staples of fringe literature. Puharich himself wrote that the Soviet Union was developing a terrifying ELF mind control beam based on Tesla's work, which he blamed for various calamities in the 1970s. From disease outbreaks to abnormal weather. Such claims, albeit far from verified, illustrate how Puharich's thinking combined an engineer's outlook with an apocalyptic imagination. Tragically, Puharich's final chapter was marked by financial difficulty and declining health. When Josh Reynolds died in 1994 without making provision for Puharich's long-term support, Puharich, then in his mid-70s, was forced to leave the North Carolina estate where he had been living and working. He was, by that time, frail and suffering from multiple medical ailments, including severe diabetes, kidney failure, and cognitive impairment. In late 1994, as an eviction loomed, Puharich was hospitalized and then released to the care of his companion. On January 3rd, 1995, Andrija Puharich died after an apparent heart attack caused him to fall down a flight of stairs in the house he was still occupying on the Reynolds estate. He was 76 years old. Given Puharich's history, it was perhaps inevitable that even his death spiral spurred whispers of conspiracy. Some speculated about the stress of eviction or other forces contributing, but the proximate causes were natural health issues and an accident. He was cremated shortly thereafter, survived by his children and remembered by a small circle of colleagues and admirers. Assessing Andrija Puharich's legacy is a complex task. In an academic setting, his contributions to conventional science, such as the patents and the early hearing aid breakthroughs, are recognized and concrete. However, it is his paranormal investigations and occult involvements that continue to fascinate and provoke debate. Puharich stands as a representative of a particular era in Cold War America, when the search for expanded human potential, the intrigue of the occult, and the shadow of government experimentation all converged. He was a boundary crosser, a medical doctor who unabashedly investigated psychics and UFO claims, an army officer who held seances, a technologist who invoked ancient gods. To some, he was a visionary who opened new frontiers. Indeed, a number of threads he pulled have become mainstream interest today. For instance, the study of altered states, remote viewing, and the influence of electromagnetic fields on biology. To others, he was too credulous, a man whose eagerness to find magic in the world led him to be deceived by frauds or to construct elaborate, unfalsifiable belief systems. Contemporary writers have variously cast him as a sincere but overzealous researcher, or as a manipulator weaving a long-term experiment in belief with the nine as a grand psyop. What is certain is that Puharich was deeply immersed in the occult milieu of his time. He hobnobbed with psychics, astrologers, secret society members, and intelligence officials alike, moving fluidly among these domains. The secret societies that touched his journey were not the classic fraternal orders, but rather ad hoc, clandestine groups sharing esoteric interests, from the Round Table Foundation's wealthy mystic patrons to the shadowy Lab 9 circle, contacting purported cosmic beings. By weaving together the theory of extraterrestrial intervention with age-old mystical concepts, like linking the nine to the Egyptian Aeneid, Puharich was a forerunner of later ancient aliens and New Age spiritual movements. Indeed, the narrative of powerful non-human intelligences guiding humanity's fate, which he championed, can be seen echoed in many modern UFO religions and conspiracy theories. Academically and historically, Puharich's work serves as a case study in the challenges of applying scientific inquiry to phenomena at the edge of knowledge. He routinely confronted the problem of repeatability. Many of his astonishing results, materializations, teleportations, etc., were observed only under his particular conditions and could not be easily replicated by others, leading to the broader scientific community. Yet, unlike many pure fringe figures, he did attempt to document and measure what he witnessed, and he engaged with critics and institutions in trying to make sense of it all. His papers and archives, some of which survive, contain valuable data on mid-20th century psi experiments and the sociology of those experiments, who was involved, how they were funded, etc. In conclusion, Andrija Puharich remains a puzzling and multifaceted figure. He lived a life that reads at times like modern myth, replete with secret Pentagon briefings on ESP, jungle mushroom visions, channeled extraterrestrial psychic children, wealthy occult devotees, mysterious fires, and intentions to stop mind control rays. Yet he also left tangible traces in the form of publications and devices that reflect a genuine, if unorthodox, scientific curiosity. While mainstream science did not validate his most extraordinary claims, Puharich undeniably played a key role in popularizing and legitimizing the study of parapsychology and the idea that the paranormal deserves serious attention. His collaboration with Uri Geller alone had an outsized impact, sparking decades of research into metal bending and remote viewing across the world. And the legend of the nine that he midwifed has taken on a life of its own, inspiring books, documentaries, and speculation about secret alien councils. From an academic perspective, Puharich's endeavors illustrate the interplay between cultural context and scientific exploration. He was a product of the atomic age anxieties, the psychedelic 60s, and the new age 70s. Each of those eras' preoccupations can be seen in his projects, be it psychic warfare, consciousness expansion, or channeling wisdom for a planet in crisis. Studying his work offers insights into how unconventional ideas gain traction and how the boundary between science and the occult is navigated by those determined to push it. In the end, whether one views Andrija Puharich as a bold explorer of the unknown, a modern occultist in scientist's clothing, or a cautionary tale of credulity, there's no doubt that he occupies a unique place in the history of 20th century occult and psychic research. His life's narrative, recounted here in summary, remains as thought-provoking and enigmatic as the phenomena he spent pursuing. And that is all, folks, for the prepared content of this session. So, let's see what people have to say. Wow, actually, there's a lot of people who are interested in this one. All right, so I'm just going to get back to the comments. I will try. Good Lord, people. Just trying to find where I left off. There we go. All right. We went back. We went back pretty far. All right. Alfred Hitchcock. I like the name. All right. Yes, our genes were edited. It's been proven now. The Genome Project has proven that our advancement accelerated at a particular point in our genome in a specific sequence that had to be edited. Yeah, probably. Spider Bites writing, I think the moon is starting to rust. Who knows? Joseph Gomez is writing, plastics and chemicals have been blurring our genders and reducing our fecundity for decades. It won't be long now before we're wiping ourselves out. Maybe. Spiritual Ascension is saying the moon is a hologram. If there is a civilization there, it will rust quicker. Spider Bite is writing, I think the moon is a metal ball. It could be. It could be when they crashed one of the lunar modules on there and the moon vibrated for an hour or something. I don't remember the amount of time, but it did not act like Earth would if a similar thing happened. Okay, so Gray House writing, apparently the last remote viewer the CIA sent to observe the moon ops remains in a coma and their consciousness marooned in captivity there. I've heard that story. I don't know what the provenance of it is or who it came from. Spiritual Ascension is saying you don't want to know the real reason for the moon. It's like an observation post. Would be my guess. Let's see. So Spiritual Ascension says, I don't know why some folk are so quick clap back with a counter belief before even ever going out and doing ample research to discredit the claim they are openly trying to dispute. All right, no more space babes. All right. Spider Bite writes, there are a few possibilities as to the moon. We can speculate all day, but we don't truly know unless you've been there. Well, Spiritual Ascension saying, why is it out in the daytime and why is it see-through until it gets dark? Tim Beck writes, Science in the Akashic Record Club of Brussels, Metaphysical Branch of Club of Rome by Irving Laszlo. Managerial class Brahmins, kooky and more real than not. Think Loosh before Loosh was in the popular vernacular zeitgeist. All right, let me go back to people I skipped. Okay. Okay. Tim Beck writes, Amanita Muscaria touched the moon in Ojibwe. It's a Native American language. All right, well, I'm not going to debate the moon landing. No one's really explained the Van Allen belt radiation, getting through that to me. So I'm not even going to. I just can't prove either way. Okay, good. Somebody called me in the middle of my thing, and then when that happens, my cell phone hijacks my sound. Okay, chances yeah. John Kurtz, right? Chances of the moon's synchronous rotation with Earth is like 0. Yeah, I think that's fair. Spider Bite says definitely what they showed people on TV was fake. I don't think they can get here, although there is movement up there. Not saying it's people. Okay. Yeah, exactly. We must be getting close to the end because I was just talking about Van Allen. Van Allen. The Van Allen belts is the remnants of the destruction of Tiamat. Yeah, Tiamat is alleged to be what created the asteroid belt, basically, the planet that became the asteroid belt. Okay, Tim Back right. Alex Bailey, externalization of the hierarchy is embedded itself within the Mormon evangelical mega churches. Here we go. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. Um, sorry, I'm just trying to go through this relatively quickly. Logan Clark he says, "You guys need to chill. I just want it to be a radioactive vacuum." Okay, Spiritual Ascension says it is a vacuum, but why radioactive, Logan? Like an MRI machine. So Marpy is saying emergency new comet discovered Swan 25 Bravo coming to Earth in October 2025. This is not Atlas. It's besides it and revealed out of nothing. That's weird. Tim Beck writes, I'm a grug bud that reads, goes in nature, am interested in beyond within things. I'm just sharing here, nothing overwhelming. Fun guy when I'm at rest, Tim Beck says. Uh, Owen Clarks is saying, I want to have a chat with Mother Ayahuasca. I've got some questions for that biz. Spiderbite writes, off you go, come back with vital information. Tim Beck says, try and capture it in clay and paint, few and far between, but it's amusing in the attempt. Spiritual Ascension writes, so handle her accordingly. Oracle of Relphi says, get information. Spiritual Ascension at Tim, indeed. Everybody, okay. Hey, Jenny Topside, good to see you. Okay, so Logan Clark writes, Grant Cameron was inferring NDEs and abduction phenomena were connected because of experiencers saying that they have all the information in the universe. I've had from mushrooms from several times. Okay. Okay. Yeah, Logan Clark. Jack Sarfati is always a good listen. I recommend taking Valium beforehand. Sorry, I'm just going through. Tim Beck saying, I found him from Robert Anton Wilson 35 years ago. Yeah, I need to drink some. It's getting cold anyway. Tim Beck says Collins Elite at Demon Scratched Me, CIA, Dad Tucker, all hard pass. Tim Beck is saying. Yeah, spiritual ascension has been consistent with that only 15% of people are real. Who knows? Good golly, there are a lot of comments. I appreciate it, but that's why I'm skimming through so much, because I just want to make sure I get through it. Okay. All right, Spider Bite. Spider Bite has to go. Have a great rest of your weekend. Logan Clark writes, I just want the world to know some UAP and NHI is real. I feel like if we get over that hurdle, minds will open. Yeah, I think so. Logan Clark says, I was a god in my past life. This one sucks. Logan Clark says, looking forward to the cardiac event that will send me back. Oracle at Relfi is saying, I can see through to the other side of the moon. Logan Clark Borshaw going through these comments. Well, it's giving me content. I still have 15 minutes left. How many comments are there? Boy, good God. But Night Slacker, all you got to do is writes, damn, I missed it. I love some Nine Talk. You just go back and don't go to the beginning, because there's more comments at the beginning. But if you go about 30 minutes in, that's around when I start. Especially how these beings influence our pulp. I didn't even discuss that. I need to learn more about that. Oh, I'm getting toward the end. At night, Tim Beck writes that look to Tavistock of human relations. Explains a lot. It's been exceptionally great, but I'm working all the time, so I don't really get to enjoy it. Yeah, it's really nice. Hey, thank you, Alfred Hitchcock. Writes, thank you, Sean. Take care. Your work is always appreciated. I appreciate you, brother. Oh yeah. I definitely talked about Roddenberry. Yeah, he was. Yeah, we talked about him, the Night Stalker. I like the name, actually. I probably said Night Stalker first, but yeah, the Night Stalker. Roddenberry got the idea. Yeah, he absolutely did. Yep. And then up, obviously, the ripples that Star Trek had. Jeff. How's Jeff? Which Jeff? Remind me. I interview so many people that I. Nice. That's pretty awesome. At least, hopefully, it's not boring. Yeah, I think Jalal, you live north of me, I think. Yeah. So, oh my lord. So what I'm trying to saw another owl last week. I have it on video. I'm not it's on my phone, so I got to go through some like contortions to get to it, but it was on the same roof that I showed last time. Only this time it was oriented outward like a sentinel. It's kind of weird. So I just checked on ChatGPT what that means, and it was facing to the west, and it was basically scanning everywhere but my house, like it was like a sentinel or a watcher. And apparently, when it's looking west in that direction, it symbolizes the archangel Gabriel. Again, another weird synchronicity. Oh, east in the Loomis Basin. I got it. Yeah, it's finally gotten mild, which is wonderful. So, all right. So, by the way, I haven't asked about this yet, but if you think you're subscribed, please check to confirm that YouTube did not arbitrarily unsubscribe you for whatever reason. If it's a algorithm issue, if it's a deliberate thing, I'm not making any judgment on that, but just check to make sure you're still subscribed. If you frequently watch this podcast and you enjoy it, please subscribe. It is really meaningful. It makes it easier for me to get good guests. If they see a high subscriber number, I'm more likely to be able to get them. For those of you who want me to talk to Joe McMoneagle, I'm about 85,000 subscribers short of probably what I would need to entice him to come on. So again, like, please subscribe and help me get there. And then of course I'm just going to throw that down there so that I don't have to incessantly repeat these things. Oh yeah. Oh, Nusatelli. Yeah, I need to reach out to him because we do frequently communicate via Twitter. I mean, but it's open. Everybody can see it. But I can also send him an email privately. He did a great job at that hearing. He's a really good dude. I really like him. And I met him in person at the Soul conference. So that's how I originally got to know him. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, Nusatelli is a great. They kept screwing up his name though. I kept calling him like Nucatelli, or it was just weird. Yep, that's right. Humanity was groomed to be consumers by the same people who now want to eradicate us for being consumers. Correct. Peaches and cream. Oh, come on, Logan. I don't believe in big YouTube. Just kidding. Yeah. I was like, come on, man. So the other thing I talked about the owl. What is that? Who knows? I started doing weekend remote viewing lessons with the future forecasting group. So I did my first lesson today, basically just going through ideograms. So I had what they call target contact on both, which is good. But I still have a lot of practice to get through. Thank you, Spiritual Ascension, who writes, seriously, the best people are right here on this channel, host and viewers. I appreciate you, Spiritual Ascension. The Night Stalker said the Nine talked about how they need our minds to work machines so they can enter our reality. Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we just read is actually a lot of the stuff that Nathaniel Gillis talks about in his research, as does Stephen Mera. Yeah, so they don't. Yeah, the Night Stalker. So they don't want us gone, just mindless vessels. Yeah, Logan Clark says they're succeeding. Then, yeah, work like machines. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. All right, let me see. Just checking a few things here. Let's see how this whole experiment is going. Eh, it's meh. Um, yeah, okay. I'm just taking care of one thing really quickly. Okay. All right, so Chris Knowles goes deep on this stuff too. The Night Stalker says, sorry. Yeah, it could be in the Watchers, could be the same thing. Night Stalker, some things maybe. Yeah, Night Stalker says, yeah, Archons, whatever, Titans. Roger that, Spiritual Ascension says. Yeah, I think I saw very briefly Grey Out, but Anunnaki. Incredible that druggies are still fertile. Indeed. Indeed. All right, what else? What else is going on? What's going on Twitter? Okay. Tim Beck is saying, I suspect the preliminary advanced tech is being rolled out human friendly fascism style. Yeah. Going to try to control everything. Maybe. Maybe that is the case. Let me see if I can find some of these. This Al video. It's the fastest way I can find this. Camera uploads. If I could, oh, come on. Stuff takes forever to find sometimes. I'm basically filing it at the same time as I'm showing it. So this looks like it was September 9th. Okay. All right, it's doing its download magic. However long that's going to take. All right. All right, I'll play this one first. Um, just missed like a bunch of. I was flipping through reels while listening just now and came across an owl staring me in the face. That's interesting. What was that? Sean, watch Nathan Reynolds, The Linen Railroad. Just do it. Okay. Oh yeah, the Venom story from the. Yeah, that looks. Who knows? Good. Like on Saturdays, I break it, but I'm still losing, but it's slowed down. Okay, let's see. Let me tag this and then. Here we go. All right, let me just see how it looks. Yeah, I'm glad I checked. All right, here we go. Notice how it's looking parallel to my location, and then it's going to look around like 270 degrees, basically. I think I got its attention once, but it just kind of ignored me after that. See? Okay, so that's one of them. All right, let me see another one. That one's not as impressive, so I won't play that. The other one is just a video of me with the owl behind me, just to prove that that's about it. So I don't think I need to show that one. All right, let me just go through the last. Oh, it's more than 600K in Cali. That house is probably. I mean, I could look it up on the stream, but it's probably 1.4 million. Spiritual ascension. Oh, Sean, it's crazy, but I live in the suburbs of South Wales or New South. I don't even know what it's called. New South Wales. I was out on the back and heard a noise. I had not hooting. Looked up on the next door neighbors, and there was an owl. Unheard of. Seriously, like now, or just like when I started showing this stuff. Huh. All right. Oh, holy shit! You're right. Let me confirm. Let me confirm because the time's stamped on the video. Hold, I think you're right, dude. I think you're right. Hold on. Uh, Yeah. Wait, September 9th. Well, it's 2 nines, right? Pretty synchronistic date to be playing it on tonight's show. Well, this is 9/13. So yeah, so 9/9. I thought there was like a third 9 in there, but I got excited. But yeah, it was a few days ago. It was a few days ago. Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. No. Was it on the 9th of September? Because that's when I saw that one. All right, everyone. I'm about 2 minutes over, so I appreciate your time. I still have work to do, so I got to get that work done. But thank you as always. Take care of yourself. Yeah, a lot of people have reported that to me, actually. Like, when I start talking about owls, they start seeing owls. It's kinda weird. Actually, I brought my son out. Like, I left that location, and I brought my seven-year-old son up the hill, and he saw his first owl. That was his first owl. The first time he saw an owl in his life, at least in the wild, let's say. I can't speak to zoos and things like that. What do I infer from its presence? It's got like a sentinel energy, like it's watching over the family or something. Hey, Miss Tammy, good to see you. Have a great night. Thank you, Logan. Yeah, could be spiritual ascension. All right, everyone. Have a fantastic night. Rest of your weekend. God bless. Stay frosty, and avoid crowds and don't get taken in by all this anxiety and things like that, because that's kind of the point. So have a great weekend, all. Talk soon.